Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Grape live tasting live from Prestwich. What's up, ladies and gents? It's great to have you here. We are going to be joined by the one and only Ken Forrester very shortly. You know what? This is like a blast from the past, this man, isn't it? This really is something really quite special. We are back once again with the Renegade Master, man. It is old school pandemic numbers. Yes. We are here. We're back with a bang. We've got loads of people on, and there's only one reason for that. It's Baz's and mine, our endless charisma.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what everybody tunes in for.
More importantly, the epic Ken Forrester. This is a repeat of our first tasting, of our live tasting that we did with him back in February 2021. I watched it before. I was wearing this shirt, which is a problem. That's a problem. If I'm wearing the same fucking shirt.
We were also a lot fatter.
We were a lot fatter. I'm not going to lie. We were chunky boys. It was something really quite to behold. And we also were missing today what we had then, which is R.I.P. She's not dead. No. Jen isn't here. Apart from that, the background's the same, the music's the same, the technological fuck-ups are exactly the same.
The menus are wrong.
Not your fault, Grace. Not your fault, Grace. We've got producer Grace behind the camera there, taking this all very personally. And it's not her fault at all. In fact, if anybody's fault, it's Ken's fault. Anyway. Before we get cracking, I just want to thank everybody for booking on and all your support over the last however long. It's been a tough old ride. And you know what? It's really nice to wind down with 6 absolutely incredible wines. But if we're going to do this properly, guys, for the man that needs no introduction, let's give him a little intro, shall we? We are going to be trying some Ken Forrester wines. So.
Wine is no doubt critically serious. You see a barrel, the slow pour of wine, and somebody swirling a glass. No, not even. Wine is wine. It's wet, it's delicious if it's done right. If it's not done right, trust your palate. Spit it out, get something that's good. Enjoy good wine, the wine that you like, that your palate says, yum. This is good stuff. Hi, I'm Ken Forrester, and this is about, take it again. What's at the heart of this winery is what we want you to feel when you take home a bottle of this wine. We want you to open that wine. We want you to be able to drink that wine and say, should have bought 2 bottles. You know, what makes this place special is the people that are involved in the place. And it's a very small, dedicated team. And it's about growing in the community. And it's about developing people and developing life. Adjacent to us on Winery Road, we have the Country Guest House. And the Country Guest House has a restaurant, 96 Winery Road. The food is hearty, it's local. The flavors are fulsome. 16 hens, I mean. But at the end of the day, wine is literally a beverage. It should be seen as something to be enjoyed, something to have fun with, something to share. Refreshing, light. It's currently what's in my glass, was in my glass. Cheers.
There he is, the man, the myth, the legend. Ken, would you mind joining us on camera, please, my man? It'd be great to see you once again. Seamless, this. So here he is. Here he is,
Hi there.
Ken.
Hi.
How are you? It's great. Thanks so much for joining us once again. Ladies and gents who's watching along, let's just have a little moment, shall we? Let's have a little moment for that shirt, because I've got to be honest with you, I'm a big fan of that shirt, Ken. Beautiful. I feel like I could pull it off, but I feel like I wouldn't do it as well. Wouldn't do it justice.
Can I tell you, you got to have some fun. We're just getting into spring. The vineyard is looking amazing. We've got all our buds bursting right now. The days are getting warmer. Our solar system is kicking in. We kind of got off the grid during winter. It's just, it's wonderful. Life's good. What can I say? Life's good. Got a glass of wine. Man, feeling fairly
without a doubt. So, just a little bit for everybody else who was who's maybe thinking that we're doing this the wrong way around. Well, before we started this tasting, what we were doing was we were just having a little chat with you. About the order in which we should do this tasting, because so many people have gone for what we've put down as a bonus bottle, the dirty little secret, which we'll come on to later. We don't want to give the game away. It is the big reveal. It's the kind of crescendo to this thing, right? And we were like, where is it going to fit in? Because if we're going to have these big, voluptuous, tannic, Grenache and Syrah-driven wines, to then go back to that Chenin, is that going to be underwhelming? Are we not going to be doing it justice? And what you've come back with is a revised order. So for you guys that have the wines at home, we are starting with wine number 3. Wine number 3, which is this one just here, the Three Halves, which you'll come on to because the name for us makes perfect sense. I'm sure it's going to for everybody else at home as well. The blend of Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvedre. And then we're going to move on to the Gypsy, wine number 4, if you've got the numbered bottles. That's going to be the second of our reds. And then we're going to move on to the whites. Then we'll then go for the Old Vine Reserve Chenin, which is wine number 1. Then the FMC, Fumka, fucking marvelous Chenin, Forest of Maynard Chenin, whatever you want to call it. That's going to be wine number 4, but it's got number 2 on the bottle. And then we're going to go for some Dirty Little Secret, and we'll finish with a pop of Sparkle Horse at the end.
Sounds like a good evening to me.
Oh my God, we've been looking forward to this for an absolute day. An absolute day. Ken, thank you so much for joining us. Now, so many people that are on this tasting were on the previous tasting. So, one of the things that came through on the last one is just how well you speak. We'd love if you could just give us the rundown of how you came to be in the wine industry. We touched on this last time around. It's not where you started your industry, started your career, but there was a natural segue from what you were doing into what you then ended up doing, as well as a nifty little real estate deal at the birth of the Rainbow Nation. So give us a rundown of how you came to be making wines.
Well, Tom, and good evening to all of your guests this evening. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Great to be able to share a glass of wine. And yeah, it's kind of like old times, new times. What can I say? Hopefully we can come and do this to you right in the store sometime before the end of this year. That would be.
There'd be a queue down the block. It'd be something to behold.
Well, there you go. I've got a date in mind. We'll talk about that. But the idea was, I guess, something like a midlife crisis, except I had no idea what that meant. I'd been in restaurants. I had restaurants, 5 restaurants. I was in Johannesburg, got my wife and I to come down to a wedding here in the Cape, Johannesburg to Cape Town, about 1,000 miles apart. We'd come down, flown down, spent the weekend here. I was driving around, showing all my friends that I get wines from. And we were kind of driving by, talking to a friend of ours, one of the winemakers, Rustin Freddy, in fact, Yanni Engelbrecht, the winger who famously was tackled in the first half of a game, went on to score 2 tries, and then found out that he'd broken his shoulder, his collarbone. Yeah, that was old school rugby. That's how it used to be. That's how the game should be played.
Oh, everything smelled of liniment. All the bowls were made out of heavy leather. Everybody's jersey was made out of cotton, and it weighed a ton. When you there was at the beginning of my rugby playing career. Now it's all spandex and super tight, and everybody's got 6 packs and can run 100 meters in 4.5 seconds. It's all ludicrous. It was better when it was back then. It was made out of bone and sinew and anger.
And you could sharpen a stud. You'd sharpen your front stud. Just
Ken's persona of this mellifluous, wonderful orator it's sliding away, because now we know that you're a dirty bastard on the rugby field.
You got to give what you get. The best thing about rugby is that it's 80 minutes of boxing. And after that 80 minutes, you have a beer with your mates, and anybody takes it off the field doesn't deserve to get back on the field. It's all about what you do on the field, having fun on the field, and having a beer together later. That's rugby. I mean, that's the heart of rugby. It's a game of gentlemen played by hooligans, I think, or a game of hooligans played by gentlemen. I'm never sure. But it's that kind of thing.
It's the latter. Football is a game of gentlemen, a game of... Oh, fuck it. Never mind. Yeah. All right. I'm with you.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'll see you in the next lineup. Get up there. So what I'm saying is that we came down, spoke to Yanni, and said to Yanni, like, surely there's got to be a farm down here, a vineyard, that just needs some TLC, needs some love and care. We were right on the cusp of the new elections, of the new democratic disposition that was taking place in South Africa. People were leaving the country. People had lost faith. People were kind of packing up and going. 1993, the elections were in 94. And Yanni said, there's an old farm, there's an old place down here, but those soils, well, you're never going to plant Cabernet on those soils. You'll never grow Cabernet. They're too sandy. You need to get, you need to get mountain slopes. I said, Yanni, I don't need to do Cabernet. I want to do something else. I want to do white grapes. He said, you should check this property. We came down, had a look at the property. It was absolutely broken, shattered, destroyed, bankrupt. It was sitting in the bank's books. The bank was eager to tidy up their portfolio and get rid of it. They put it on an auction, and lo and behold, I was the last man standing on the auction, and I managed to scoop it up at a pre-election bargain price. As I said to my wife at the time, let's go down to the Cape and buy the biggest piece of land we can't afford. And literally, that is exactly what we did. We bought 50 hectares, 126 acres of prime property, planted to vineyard, that with a homestead on it that was built in 1694. The walls are 3 foot thick. I'm sitting in one of those rooms in this house right now, and the walls are just amazingly thick. It's a wonderfully insulated old home with a thatched grass roof. And we've just had the best last 30 years here, the best time of our lives. Brought up 2 girls, had never less than about 6 dogs, never more than about 10. I had horses and dogs and ducks and geese, and life has just been magnificent.
I do. There is, and I mentioned this last time. I promise I won't keep bringing it up last time, but it was important that tasting for us. It was a really sort of special thing. But at the point when people are fleeing this fledgling nation that has undergone such turmoil, at that point that people are fleeing that, you're instead putting down roots figuratively and literally. You know, so you're as old as the new South Africa. You're as old as, and you're as integrated mud under the fingernails, and friends with all manner of people that work there and all the rest. I think it's a beautiful sort of symbiosis there.
Yeah, and it goes further than my daughter was what they called the first Mandela generation. She was the first batch of kids that went through the entire schooling system. When she came out of school to go to university, her group that matriculated before going to university was the first group. They were the first Mandela kids. They were born free, as they called them. They were the born free generation. They'd had Mandela as their president from when they started going to school. So there's lots to that, lots of stuff to that. And it's been an exciting journey. It's been a fascinating journey. It's had its ups and downs, no doubt about it. South Africa, I think, is no different to any other young country. I mean, it has any kind of new government will always shake, rattle, and roll. And we've had the shake, rattle, and rolls for a while. And we seem to somehow hold it together. It just doesn't ever get, it always looks bad, it never gets bad. And long may that last. You know what? As a nation of people, you talk to South Africans, we all get on like a house on fire. You get government involved and it's going to be a complete nightmare. I mean, government is just a complete disaster. I was talking to some friends the other day, and we were talking about the dream team, and we were sitting saying, okay, let's pick our dream football team, dream rugby team. Yeah, let's pick a dream cricket team. Okay, let's pick a dream government. Could you name 5 people you'd like in your dream government from anywhere in the world? You know, it's a disaster.
No, I've got to be honest with you. That conversation sounds like it petered the fuck out. You know what I mean? It's like, right, okay, well, I need to have, because you're South African, you'd be Yanni the Beer at number 10 because he crucified the English with his drop goals, etc., etc. But then the minute anybody starts talking about the dream politicians, everyone goes, Ken, I think I'm probably going to go. I've got my taxis arriving or something. You know. I've always had a huge affinity for South Africa. I had South African PE teachers throughout when I was at school. So always these big burly boer chaps come over and tell you that that's not how you tackle somebody when you're playing rugby. I went around South Africa on my gap year. One of the most sort of influential moments of my life was waking up in the Kruger and going on a big long walk and coming back and drinking Castle Lager. It's an incredibly important country for me personally. But before we get too deep into this conversation that we promised this was going to be, I think it's probably time that we had a little bit of wine with some of the guys and girls at home that are champing at the bit. I've got to be honest with you. Most people have gone for carafes and full bottles with this. So people have got plenty, but just in case they don't, I think it's probably time that we tried our first wine.
It's a primeur. Sorry, it's a primeur. First time I'm tasting this.
There we go. Exactly. First outing on a live tasting and first outing for both of us. This is the Three Halves. Ken, talk us through this one.
So the idea, and just to go back to, excuse me, I beg your pardon for having changed the sequence. But the fact that we had this, the dirty little secret, and we needed to kind of fit it in, it makes perfect sense to drink the red wines first and get layers of tannins on your palate. And you get to the white wines, and it's like the relief of mafficking. The white wines just give you this lightness, freshness. You get all the fruit, so it's a lovely way. It's actually a lovely way to taste back to front.
It's
and Three Halves.
I'm sorry to go. Something we've said time and time again is you can go from a big heavy red to something light and vivacious and energetic because it resets everything and it gives you that kind of power up boost. So it's not completely. And you said the French do this all the time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And particularly where they talk about big heavy reds, they'll start with reds and end with whites. Always, almost always.
Right.
Yeah. So here we go.
Three halves.
We've got in my glass. I've got the Three Halves. Three halves, quite simply, makes no sense at all, but it does. The logic is perfectly sound. I planted the very first Mourvèdre vineyard in Stellenbosch, barely a year after the first vineyard in South Africa. And the idea was Mourvèdre is one of the Mediterranean grape varieties. It grows in a typically Rhone climate, Mediterranean. And here in Stellenbosch, we have the pleasure, the luxury of long, dry summers, cold, wet winters, snow on the mountaintops, a bit of snow on the ground every 5 years. Mediterranean climate, Mourvèdre is absolutely suited to that climate. And there was none planted. I could not believe it. And I figured out I could plant some Mourvèdre. Got 5 years later, after having planted the vines, we got the fruit and we started making wine. And I made this wine and I was pretty horrified, to say the least. I was kind of shocked. It tasted like chopped liver, raw meat, blood, iron. It tasted like I had a bacterial infection in the winemaking. I went to go see the professor at the local university, and I said to him, Lofty, I guess I got this wrong. Tell me what I have to do, what I did, and why it ended up like this. And he tasted the wine. And he said, no, that's Mourvèdre. It's iron rich, and you're going to put in some old barrels, give it some Grenache or Syrah, blend some Grenache Syrah. You'll be thrilled with the way it turns out. This is exactly that. It's half Mourvèdre, and the other two halves are Grenache and Syrah. So if you're half Mourvèdre and you have another two halves that are Grenache and Syrah, you're three halves, exactly. That's how this got its name. It was three halves from the very get-go. This is the wine.
It obviously makes sense as well because so often these three grapes do act in harmony and synergy together. They're used so frequently, but they are usually used the other way around. Grenache driven with Syrah for color and for spice, and Mourvèdre as a kind of filler mopping up agent. You've gone the other way around.
Absolutely. And it cost us dearly because what we do is we age the wine for 5 years at the cellar before we release it, because those tannins on Mourvèdre, very fine tannins. If you imagine the teeth on a hacksaw blade, 30 teeth per inch, compared to the teeth on a big wood saw, 5 teeth per inch, these are the 30 teeth on the hacksaw blade. They're tiny tannins, but there's loads of them. And the only way to soften that is time. So this is 2013, and the wine is now just drinking beautifully. This is where, I'd want to sit and have it.
It is quite spectacular. Baz, do you want to do a little dissection for us, brother?
It'd be my pleasure.
Cheers to everybody at home, and thanks
Cheers.
so much, Ken, for giving us your time once again. Right.
So straight away, what I'm noticing here is a little bit of that garnet color coming through. That obviously indicates that this is wine of age. Obviously makes sense with the 5 years cellaring back at the winery.
Ken, 5 years in bottle after any maturation.
5 years in bottle. Yeah.
Wow.
It's not otherwise not quite ready yet. That's obviously a a real sign of going for quality or flavor rather than making the bucks quick, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, you can see that in the coloration of the wine. It's almost that sort of like lovely garnet brick color towards the outline. Legs are medium, relatively quick. On the nose, wow, it's quite smoky. It's quite earthy.
Yeah,
and obviously that is where the Mourvèdre comes into play in this case. There's also a bit of a herbaceous note.
The through line of that sort of that meatiness and that ironiness is kind of it, but it's softened, and so we're now looking at, you know, a cured meat, you know, a copa or something like that. Is that has gentled off now to where it's this kind of really opulent cured meat note, as opposed to the, you know, chewing on liver.
A lovely little bit of spice as well, some black pepper.
Yeah, a little bit of sort of
got sweet spice as well.
I was going to say a little bit of kitchen, a little bit of Christmas pudding spices, that kind of vibe.
Yeah,
smells incredible. Let's have a little taste. Salute.
Prost.
Prost.
Sean says, "We love you, Ken. Please come to Presswich." That would be a bit of a fucking coup, wouldn't it? Joel, a bit of a blue cheese or Stiltony aroma from this one as well.
Yeah, there's definitely some sort of savoury aspect there as well.
The texture of it it's got a lovely weight to it, hasn't it? A lovely mouth coating.
I get that. I get a real silkiness to start off with, and the tannins they come into play towards the finish of the wine.
Smoke.
But it's delicate as well, integrated. It's not in your face. It doesn't make you like.
So yeah, these little hacksaw teeth, I presume are coming from the tannins within the skin. What process does the wine undergo? In fact, you know what? Just begin at the beginning with this, Can. Tell us all about it.
So Mourvèdre, just for starters, means that if you planted it, you were a bit stupid, because you're going to be closing your winery about a month after everybody else has packed up and gone home. And it takes that long to ripen on the vine. So you've got everything done, but Mourvèdre is like saying, not me, I'll be out here for a while longer. And Mourvèdre will hang and hang and hang. It takes forever to ripen, and eventually it'll come in. You got to go and pick it, get it in. You bring it into the winery. The winery's been idle for nearly a month. We put this into a destalker. We destalk this, take the berries into a press, break them up a little bit, and then drop them into a tank and let that tank just soak, warm up. A wild yeast fermentation starts, and we don't inoculate this with yeast. I have a bit of Scottish background, and I can see no point whatsoever in buying yeast if the yeast is present on the grapes. Just a waste of money, waste of time. That's silly. That you wouldn't want to do that. Wouldn't want to throw good money into that. And so we rely on wild yeast, natural yeast. We get that to ferment, and we allow that fermentation to happen, and we punch down twice a day. It's quite a vigorous process, punching down. The top of the tank is open. We have big battens, and you stand on the edge of the tank and you punch down this thick cake of skins that forms on the top of the fermenting juice. You get a thick kick. You could almost walk across it. In fact, anybody who's ever worked in the wineries tried to walk across it and figured out they can get 3 steps before it's too late. And then you end up in the tank. And
that tank's ruined then. It's had Dave in it.
Yeah. Now, you do not want to swim in a tank of wine. Number one, it's really dangerous. I mean, the top of that tank of wine is carbon dioxide. You take a few deep breaths of carbon dioxide and you die. It's that simple. It's just not stuff that we can live with. It's a gas that we cannot process. So people are often in wine areas that every year somebody drowns in a tank. You don't drown in the tank, you die of carbon dioxide poisoning. You take a couple of big breaths over the top of the tank, but all you're sucking in is CO2.
It's misapprehension, isn't it? People think that when you hold your breath, that is when you breathe in, it's because you need to take in oxygen. Actually, you need to get rid of the carbon dioxide, which is poisoning you.
Correct, 100%. 100%.
A lot of the time, right? People trying to stick their head into it as well. It's like, oh, let's have a smell.
Oh, the best thing, you talk about your Scottish roots in a whiskey like a mash tun. people always, every single time you see them do it, they go, oh, they open it up and go, oh, here's the mash tun where the fermentation's going on. And people put their head in like, oh, this would be all right. Like, reeling away with eyes bleeding. It's just like, and the old Scottish guys must just watch it happen and just be like, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Are you all right, you dick?
It is
also farmyard aroma in a nice way. Courtyard trio, glorious, bramble heavy, a touch of cassis with smoke, rare game and black pepper, like classy campfire evening in the forester. Anyway, Sean says black forest gatto with a hint of pepper, tastes delicious. Tracy says, can you stay at Ken's Vineyard? She's online booking plane tickets. Well, yeah. There is 96 Winery Road, and I'm pretty sure there are places to stay. Is that right, Ken?
Yes, there's a great little guest house. And let me say to you just that you could stay in Cape Town and travel to the winelands, or you could stay in the winelands and travel to the winelands. It's just so much easier. And if you need the bright city lights, you can go to Cape Town for a night, but really stay in the winelands. We've got a great little guest house. My brother runs it, simply called the Country Guest House. What else would you call a country guest house? I ask you. The Country Guest House. And it's a small little place, but it's really delightful. It's about 16 rooms. The rooms are nicely appointed, and they're right in the heart of the vineyards. You go to bed every night. You can get up in the morning and walk around a vineyard every day. It's just these wonderful. They've got mountain bikes. You can hire mountain bikes, rent a bike, and go for a ride. We've got about let me get this right. Probably about 800 kilometers. About 500 miles of mountain bike trails right around us here. Some of the most beautiful mountain biking, magic walks.
No, exactly. I've just got back from Tuscany, and I was in Montalcino, and again staying right in vineyards. And you get up everywhere you go, in every direction that you go, vineyards everywhere. It's just. And as we've said over countless tastings, wine country is the most beautiful country. Wherever you find it, wine flourishes. It usually means that all the climactic gods are all aligning and gazing down lovingly upon the area. So it is absolutely stunning. Jen and Joel of Jen and Joel fame. We're over for a few nights over New Year's Eve. Can't wait. Grace says Grape to Grain on tour, but unfortunately, Grace, that obviously hasn't happened yet, and the more we say it, the more we just torment people. Lizzie and Paul, we were there in March, absolutely stunning, with second staying in the winelands. Sean says sold it to Tracy, mountain bike sold it to Steve. I'll be there a few years when the kids can look after themselves. So you can just have a running crew of Grape to Grainers coming over to you, Ken. So there we go.
Come on, let's have a trip. Let's have a tour. Come on, spend a week here. We'll organize an itinerary for you and end up. Yeah, we'll have some fun for sure. We'll have some fun.
Done. We're sold. Yeah. Okay. So we've pumped down. So we punched down.
Right.
We now have our wine. There is as with all your wines, such a sort of delicate, elegant influence of oak. Nothing overbearing. Nothing shouting. Nothing kind of like bullying. So tell us what happens from this point on.
People say to us, how much new oak in your wine? And I say to them, slightly disappointingly, nothing. There's no new oak, because frankly, I'm not a big lover of the flavor of oak. And I'm kind of a little peeved that I don't grow any oak. So we don't have anything to talk about. We're buying somebody else's oak. Why would I want to advertise his oak and use the oak flavors? That's crazy. I mean, I grow grapes, and last time I checked, animal, mineral, fruit. Grapes are fruit. Let's make something with fruit that tastes like fruit. That's what I want to do. So for me, the fruit flavors are critically important. I want to get that fruit out there, and that shouldn't be obscured by oak. When people talk to me about the fact that we've used 100% new oak, I get slightly concerned. Why would you do that? When people say we've got 200% new oak, I get very worried. I go like, I don't want to try that.
How's that even possible to use 200% new oak?
It's a bit of a threat throughout your wines, isn't it? There's not really much shouty oak. Hardly any oak, as far as I'm aware.
No, for me, the beauty, the pleasure is in the fruit juice, is in the grape juice, and getting that grape juice to taste. And the oak is there as a vessel to round the wine off, to give the wine structure, texture, to give the wine finesse. That's the oak is finishing school. for the grape. I mean, it's just perfect.
It's the accent on the voice of the person telling the poem. If the poem's shit, it doesn't matter how good the accent is. The accent only works if the poem is beautiful as well. So you have to have the roots, you have to have the juice, you have to have all the other stuff going on, and then a little bit of oak to add that fleck, as opposed to it being the only thing that's going on.
You see, oak, the ballet that makes wine so beautiful, because what happens in the barrel is you have those barrels appear to be sealed. They don't leak. You don't have water, you don't have wine dripping out of your barrels. However, they're not sealed. They allow oxygen to permeate through the staves, because those staves are held together by a metal band. There's just a metal band around the barrel. There's no glue, there's no nails, there's nothing to hold those together except the way they chamfered and joined. But between those staves, you do get oxygen molecules coming into the barrel. And those oxygen molecules, that O2, we all seen that O2, come in, and that oxygen reaches out and picks up a nice strong little protein over here and another one over there. But now the oxygen and the two proteins are too heavy to stay floating in the barrel. The proteins on their own were fine. They could float, they could sit in the juice. Now this heavy, thin filament called a polymer, and this polymer occurs about 1 million times a day, and it happens and happens and happens all day long. And all of these threads form, and they all flip over each other, and they're all happening in different angles. Nothing arranges them all together in a straight line. So this is a mesh of polymers that slowly starts to settle through the wine. It takes about 4 months to settle down through the wine. And while it does, it picks up any solids in suspension that are there. And essentially what it does is it filters the wine naturally. So you don't put the wine through a filter, you're putting the filter through the wine in a natural way. And that's the beauty of what happens in a barrel. It won't happen in a tank because your tank's not positively charged and you don't have the micro-oxygenation process taking place. So barrels are there to allow oxygen into the wine in a micro way and to create that stability and the clarity. The barrels are beautiful, clever things, but flavoring wine, why? Why do you want to make a wine taste like wood?
Yeah, exactly. Fruit purity is something that gets mentioned an awful lot, and that is immediately lost if you use this kind of clumsy use of oak. But I do love that. I do love that description that you passed the filter through that's really clever indeed. One of the things that came up on the last time was your love of chemistry, and I think some of our teachers are on this tasting again, because we were talking about how wine is where art meets science, with a little bit of luck involved as well. And you're saying, yeah, but chemistry is art. Look at the solar system was the way you described it. Do you have a background in that, or is it purely just through obviously the work, or is it something that you have a passion for?
I just read a lot, and if I get time, I would go back to university and study chemistry. Daunting as it is, I just think it's a fascinating subject, and it happens in all walks of life. The cheeses that we talk about, the chemistry involved in the fermentation of cheese is unbelievable, truly fascinating. Chemistry is all around us. Everything that we see, touch, do, chemistry plays a role. I just love it. I just love it. It's just the most fascinating stuff.
It is literally the building blocks of life. If you say that the building blocks of reality is physics, particles, and all that kind of stuff, but life comes through chemistry. Life comes through the interaction of those molecules. So yeah, fascinating stuff. The cheese with this one, guys, by the way, was the Gruyere. That nutty smoky cheese goes absolutely blinding with this one. How long does this actually spend in wood? We've said it's older wood. How long does it actually spend in that wood? Because obviously the cutoff before even the oldest wood is going to start to play a role, and you don't want that. It does exist. So how long does it spend in there before it then spends 5 years in the cellar in a bottle?
we would make these wines individually, the Mourvedre, Grenache, and Syrah, leave them in barrel for a year, have a look at those wines when they're a year old, take the wines together as a blend and take them back to wood as a blend for a further year. So it's had 2 years in 400-liter French oak barrels. The newest barrel is 5 years old.
So double maturation, once
pre-blend, once post-blend.
Right, okay. I've got to be honest with you,
similar
Ken.
to the Gypsy.
This is so just run this over my top lip. The tannins on this are so velvety, so integrated, so gentle and voluptuous, and they add so much to the wine as opposed to being that barrier. Is there an age before which you wouldn't recommend drinking this wine? Because obviously we're now 2022 going into 23. This is 2013's vintage, so it's about 10 years. It's drinking an absolute dream. Yeah, is there a time before that where you wouldn't recommend tucking into a bottle of 3 hours?
I guess you shouldn't. I wouldn't drink it under 5 years old. Certainly, it's got to be over 5 years old. We release them at 5 years old, and I think it's just getting into its pace now. It's just getting into its stride. It's just like a long distance runner in the second half of the marathon, just getting into its stride now, just rolling along. So this has got another 10.
As we're both long distance runners, aren't we both?
Yeah. Run from the
it's a complete lie.
Is this a single vineyard like the other ones under the similar sort of like creamy label, or is this just a little bit different?
It's three vineyards. The Mourvedre here on the farm, the Syrah is here on the property, and the Grenache that goes into this is from a property which we manage and farm about 3 miles away from us. We look after a property, it's 34 hectares, but we farm the entire property, manage it, and then we get the pick of the fruit. We buy most of his fruit anyway. And so any fruit that we put into bottle, we grew that fruit. For me, the critical aspect to quality is in the fruit. My background was chefing, was being in restaurants, and you start with quality produce. Without quality produce, you can't get a great product. That's all there is to it. So for me, managing the fruit guarantees we're going to get great wine. And honestly, we tried not to interfere too much in the vineyard, in the cellar, in the fermentation. Fermentation has been fermenting for an awful long time, longer than mankind. We don't need to manage fermentation. It'll manage itself just fine. What we need to do is manage fruit quality, and that's our task. That's our role.
So that Grenache, did that sort of like fell in your lap, I believe? Was that from a friend who just wanted to get rid of it?
No, he's got 34 hectares, which I manage for him. It's Grenache. He's got some Roussanne. I make a Roussanne out of that vineyard. I got some Viognier out of that vineyard. We get Syrah out of that vineyard. And we manage and grow that whole property. And then whatever fruit I don't buy from him, I sell. And he gets the income. So it's a great site. And it's a lovely, well-planted vineyard. It's a little older than my Grenache vineyard, and I like it for that. And we keep our Grenache vineyard here on the site. We keep for rosé. So we actually make a rosé out of our Grenache. It's 100%. The whole vineyard goes into rosé. We harvest early. It's a different kind of mindset on that. Whereas his Mourvedres, his Grenache is just that much older, and we keep that for red, for full on red, not rosé at all.
Yeah, those older vines, you're not gonna pump into a rosé, are you? You're gonna keep that for something which is gonna appreciate over time a little bit more. And on that note, actually, Sean says, will it get better if you save it? Would you recommend drinking within a certain amount of time of buying? It's a question that doesn't often get asked and answered when people are dealing with wine in the sort of the way that we sell it, because people buy the wine that we sell to drink as opposed to cellar. But if you're going to make an investment into this, what is there an upper bound beyond which you don't really want to go before the wine then becomes flabby and has passed its best?
Tom, I'd venture to say you could buy 6 bottles and drink 1 a year, and by the time you get to your 6th bottle, you're going to wish you had bought 12.
You smooth talker, Ken. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to, head to grape2grain.co.uk, search for Ken Forrester. You'll find all of these wines available to buy, and if you use Ken20, you get 20% off. Do it now. Right, Ken, time to move on to wine number 2. which is actually wine number 4. This is the Gypsy. Now, this is alongside the FMC, one of the icon range, which I guess are your sort of your before you get into the passion product, there's the little secret. This is your top end expressions of either of Chenin or of Grenache and Syrah. Beautiful bottle, expensive Stelvin top, lovely textured label. It's perfect gift wine. But let's talk a little bit about how it's made, because it looks fantastic. You got given a bottle of that, you'd be like, right, amazing. Today has just got even better. But talk us through the Gypsy. From memory, is it because it was peripatetic and you took it from different plots? I seem to remember that from last time.
Let me help. The Gypsy by name, Gypsy by nature. This is a vineyard grown on a hillside, 200 kilometers from where we are here in Stellenbosch, up the west coast in Pikkenierskloof, a vineyard planted in 1959, Tom. 59, a really proper old vineyard.
Hello. And
planted on its own rootstocks. It's not grafted. Bizarrely, this vineyard was never grafted onto a phylloxera-resistant rootstock. And for that reason, nobody has ever planted alongside this vineyard because they just shit scared. Whatever they plant next to it will be infested with kind of rot, etc. So nobody's planted next to it. So this little vineyard stands in splendid isolation on a mountainside like a gypsy. And this is our gypsy. That's hence the name. And the fruit, the Grenache fruit, is truly the very smallest fruit that I work with. It's the most concentrated, remarkably concentrated fruit, the most magical bunches. And I'll show you on my thumb, on my own dirty little thumb, that's the size of the berry.
Now, this is obviously absolutely crucial. When I was just in Montalcino, I was just there.
Did you go to Montalcino?
I was just there.
You never talked about it.
Wasn't that great. Anyway, these tiny little berries obviously is what we're chatting to the winemaker of San Polo in Montalcino. The aim of winemakers is to produce these tiny little berries, because the tiny berries have a much higher level of interaction with much higher level of interaction with that juice with the skin. There's more skin to juice ratio. You're gonna get more extraction without over extracting. It's like there's so much there to be working with. You don't have to leave it so it then becomes over extracted and overly tannic. Is that the case with Syrah? Because that's the way that he describes Sangiovese to me.
With this Grenache, 100% that's the case. And those tiny berries, Grenache is a grape that doesn't give a lot of color. When we got a tiny berry, we got very little. You can imagine as the berry gets smaller, you have very little flesh inside the berry and more skin ratio. So your skin will allow the wine to color. And you can leave the skins on the grape and ferment the skins and get that fermentation to draw all the color out of the skins. And that's what we've done with this. And this wine is mainly Grenache. When I say mainly, it's probably 70 to 90%, depending on the vintage. And we love the pure red fruit expression, strawberries, wild strawberry, cranberry expression of red fruit on this wine. From the nose, you get that beautiful, pretty strawberry kind of nose on it. And this goes right through into kind of the most, and we spike this with a little bit of Syrah. And the Syrah provides a platform, almost a stage for the Grenache to show off on. So the Syrah is just a stage, and it provides that kind of lift for the Grenache. But this wine really is showing off like a Grenache.
Yeah, interesting. It's 14% ABV, so 1% less than the three halves. But it does just taste. It just smells a little bit more intense, a little bit more
concentrated.
Yeah, for sure.
Super aromatic. It fills the room with aroma.
Yeah, and a really peculiar. And the strawberry is immediately coming, but it's not like pick your own fresh off the plant strawberries. It's something more. It's like strawberries cooked in balsamic reduction, or it's some kind of incredible confiture jam sort of
sumac, Grace.
Yeah. Sumac.
Yeah, and so skinny those skinny little wild strawberries. You get those thin little wild strawberries. That's exactly what this is like. And it's also, there was a comment about yogurt. It's got that strawberry yogurt. There's a kind of malic acid property to the wine because of the way it's fermented. So you end up, you start seeing a kind of milky sweetness, a richness from this. And it's got silky tannins. I mean, here you've got real silky soft tannins, but the wine's structured and big. It's like a velvet glove wrapped around a steel fist.
That's a lovely turn of phrase. Joel says freeze-dried strawberries and violets as well.
Yeah, there's a lovely florality there as well. It's great. It smells quite sort of like wild. There's like savory tones there as well. There's a little bit of that.
It smells wild as in like savage, like the wild sea, like the crashing together of the Angulus current and the Atlantic that smashes together. And it creates this kind of wild rockiness.
We get a bit of that sort of like earthiness and get a bit of leather saddle, like when you go horseback riding.
Yeah, we're on the 2016 here, so yep. 2016. Would you say that this is starting to kind of show as it should? Would you say that this is like the battery for this is 15 years in the future?
This is literally just settled into its pace. Do you have two glasses? Because if you take this wine and simply pour it into another glass and pour it back and taste it again, you'll be shocked at how different it is. This wine loves being decanted. This is a wine to decant every time you open it. It just opens up, it explodes. It's got a really wonderful closure on it. We're using a Stelvin Lux closure, and it's had no oxidation for the last 7 years. Now suddenly you open it up, give it some air, give it some oxygen. The wine wants to show off.
Yeah.
Look at that. It's like 5 degrees softer, richer, sweeter.
The tannins are, obviously, they haven't had that 5 years in bottle. So the tannins are more pronounced, but as with everything, everything folds together neatly and elegantly. A fantastic wine. Tell us a little bit more about what you do to this once you've harvested these tiny little berries.
So these berries, come in 20 kilogram crates, 40-pound crates. We pop them into the they get trucked down. It's a long truck journey. It's about a 3-hour truck journey down. So by the time they get here mid-afternoon, I pop them into the cold room and stack them up in a cold room. And then tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., we pull them out of the cold room and take them and drop them unceremoniously from the top of a 10,000-liter tank. We open the top of the tank and we drop these about 12 foot into the bottom of the tank, and they splatter. These bunches kind of smack the bottom of the tank and break the berries just enough. That's all I want. I just want to break the berries and smack the next crate on top and throw the next crate on top. And that's how it goes until we have a layer of grapes in this tank. Put the lid on the tank, lock it down, seal it. The tank is now the stainless steel vessel completely sealed. And I've broken all the skins of the berries, and the berries are going to start to ferment, because when sugar sees yeast, it's going to be boogie woogie. That's what they do. And they get together and they start this little boogie dance going on. I mean, sugar and yeast are like kind of, yep, that's what they do. And as they do that, they create carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide can't go anywhere because the stainless steel tank is locked down. And so there's pressure in the tank. So the pressure forces the berries and pushes on the berries and pushes juice out the berries. And the juice starts to ferment and it creates carbon dioxide and it pushes the juice out. And at some point, I open the tank with a tap on it, with a hose on it, and I pump that juice that runs out, and it comes out with the.
You don't want to open it like a crown cap of a bottle of beer, that whole top of that fucking fermentation tank, and go whomping up in the air, punch a hole through the cellar.
You connect your hose back up right into the top of the tank, and you lock it onto the top of the tank, and then you open the valve at the bottom, and you allow this gush, whoosh, to come out of the tank under pressure, and then get pumped back into the tank as you open the top of the tank and allow some gas out and some air in. And that is a wonderful carbonic maceration. You've macerated the grapes under carbon dioxide, no oxygen present. You've extracted color out of the skin of the grapes. You've broken the skin, extracted color, got a small amount of alcohol. That color is water soluble, but it's not soluble in alcohol. The alcohol binds the color. It pulls those proteins. That color is an anthocyanin, is a protein molecule. And the color, as you know, is a pigment of your imagination. If you shine a white light through a pyramid, as in Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd, you see a rainbow of color on the other side. Now, those colors in red wine are because we've erected a molecule that's a protein molecule, and we've erected that molecule to cause a refraction of light. I can change the color of a red wine by adding a drop of tannin to that wine because it changes the way the protein molecule is erected, and that changes the color of the wine. So color in red wine is an extract from the skin, but it's also a refraction of light by the way the molecules are held up and locked up. And that fermentation, that carbonic maceration, gives us a beautiful purple color, and that purple hue is visible on this wine. You can see that this wine was noticeably more purple than the Three Halves. Gypsy has that kind of hue around the edges that it's really quite purple, and that's because of that initial carbonic maceration. We then get into the tank with our food grade gumboots on and a plastic spade, and we shovel this mash out of the tank into an open fermenter, allow it to ferment, pump it into a press all the skins off the juice, and this goes into old barrels, 5-year-old barrels, and lies in barrels for a year before we get the Syrah. We look at the Syrah that we want to blend into this, we blend the two together, and then take them back to barrel for another year. And this has 2 years in oak before we bottle it, and then 5 years lying in the cellar before we release. So this is current release. This is only just been released. This is in the market.
This has 5 years in bottle, in cellar, waiting for it to be, for you to be happy to release it as well. Right.
Yeah, a lot of tender love and care goes into producing this.
I mean, one of the things that when we talk about when we start talking about the FMC is the insistence on hand sourcing and hand harvesting, because you're better. You can be more accurate about which are the perfectly sun bronzed, and turning the bunches and stuff like that, as well as providing 600-800% more work for people in the local area as well. Are these all hand harvested as well? Obviously, so much has gone into it. It would be peculiar, I think, if it wasn't.
100%, Tom. Every single thing I do. If you pick up our next wine, we're going to do the Old Vine Reserve Shannon. On the back of that label, there's a little insignia here, a pair of hands around a bunch of grapes. And that's just my own insignia. But I put that on the label to tell people that we hand harvest every single ton, every single bunch of grapes that we make that goes into a bottle, we've hand harvested. It's an immense.
Because you could machine harvest if you wanted to, right?
Well, I guess it's in Africa. You're not limited by space like you would be in Burgundy or in the West Bank of the left bank. Yep. West Bank's a different place. With the left bank of Bordeaux and stuff, you could, I guess, space it out and all that, but you keep it tight together. More stress on the vines, and the law of unintended or very much intended consequences in this case is you provide income. Support and community to local people, way over and above what perhaps you should, economically speaking.
Tom, I'm kind of don't want to be an activist, but if I were the Minister of Agriculture, I'd make machine harvesting illegal, because we can do a great job hand harvesting. You can train people. It's income. Why would we spend money on a machine that's built typically in Italy or France and ship all that money offshore to Italy or France, when we have people right around us who are begging for work, looking for jobs, who really would need and want a vacation in life, and want to be able to bring their kids up and break the cycle and end up with kids doing better than they are. It would just be so simple. 50% of South Africa is hand harvested. The other 50% is machine harvested. I don't want to knock those guys. I mean, that's their choice. It's efficient, it's quicker, it's cheaper. But seriously, we could do good. We could do good for the people around us, people in our community. And if every community simply looked after the community around that community, no community on earth would go wanting. It's a simple philosophy, so simple.
There is he's an English professor called Robin Dunbar. He created this. He's a bit perplexed that his name has been applied to it, but Dunbar's number, which is the size of a community that you can really effectively engage with. You can recognize faces. You know stories. You know. It's about 160 people, and if within that small environment of 160 people, if you do good within there, then you're doing the maximum good that you could. It's the most effective altruism you can. It's that small number of people. If you're Ken Forrester and you're talking to people on the other side of the world and all that kind of stuff, your impact can go further and larger. But it's that small community. So, how many people do you have working for you? Within Ken Forrester Wines during the harvest and during the sorting?
So we have a very small community working for us permanently of about 14 people. During harvest, we get up to 48, 50 people. And that harvest crew really is I think, a singular kind of achievement, in as much as one of our supervisors, one of the people working on the farm during harvest as a supervisor, we kind of provided him with the opportunity to get a vehicle and ran all of his business through our own office. So, the filing that one has to do for tax, for VAT, for registrations, for all the government stuff that you've got to no ordinary human being wants to get involved in opening a business and putting together all of that filing. We do that in our office. It's what we have to do. Yeah. So we kind of put the stuff together. We run the whole infrastructure of his business for him. We provided him with the capital to get a vehicle to be able to go and fetch his staff and to bring his staff to work. And he now has a labor broking business, which he runs independently. It's his business, 100% his business. We contract to him and use that labor. And so in another way, that just creates another community that's working for itself again and creating its own income and working at other people. We don't have exclusive rights to those people. That they're not contracted to us. They can't just for some of our time. And so that it really helps to make a difference. I just think that we all kind of glibly talk about organics and biodynamics. What about people? Let's be biodynamic with our people. Let's be organic with our people. Let's get our people. Let's put people
bury them underground and then turn them into tea and spray them over the vineyards. That's full biodynamic. I don't think they'd be that happy with that. I love the 3-step, 4-step, 5-step thinking ahead of time with that. You provide the interface between, I guess it's somebody that has maybe a more limited level of education, where complicated government forms would be baffling, and so would never even go down that road. You provide that interface and give them the opportunity to create something which gives them pride and a sense of purpose and self-worth, and also economically provides their family with security, and then the people working for them as well. It's just it's kind of like 4D chess. It's not just give that person a job, give them the opportunity to create something of their own. It's fantastic. Really, 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 really amazing.
It's pretty cool. And you end up getting into kind of argy-bargies with these guys, because eventually they're popular. They've got other people they're working for, and they put their rates up. You go, hey, you can't put your rate up to me. And they go, oh, yeah, we can. We're in demand. Yeah, and you just go, that's it. That's so cool. Because yes, that's how the system is meant to work. That's perfect. I'll pay more. That's cool. Just keep come back. And you end up being a victim of your own. Yeah, that's the way it is, man. That's cool.
Right, let's get tasting of this wine. The all hand harvested, but still incredibly good value for that extra labor. This is the Old Vine Reserve Chenin Blanc, the 2021 vintage. This is full on COVID wine. I said I wasn't going to mention it, but fuck it, we just have, so never mind. Ken, you are, and not by your own name, because it is quite funny. We have had some people on these tastings who gave themselves the designation of the ambassador of X region. They decided that they were that, but you are Mr. Chenin. You are the king of Chenin, as voted for by your peers, anecdotally just describing you as such, as opposed to an actual vote. But Chenin has an interesting sort of position within South African wine, because it is the grape that is associated with South Africa. Chenin Blanc started in France, found its natural home in South Africa, and it's the second cheapest wine on every wine list. But that isn't how you see the grape. That isn't how you treated the grape, and that's why your wines are not in that position. They are, a metric above, right? How did you become enamored with Chenin, and talk us through this Old Vine Reserve?
So, Tom, that's a good question. I was lucky enough to stumble upon Bernard Germain, who was Chateau de Fel in Toissay, next to Angers in the Loire Valley. He also had 3 or 4 other properties, even in Bordeaux, he had 4 properties. And Bernard Germain was a man way ahead of his time. He thought out of the box. He was brilliant. He's alive today. He's a good bloke, good friend. And Bernard allowed me to come and work with him in France and see what he was doing. And way back in 1994, 95, 96, he was fermenting Chenin Blanc in 400-liter barrels. He put Chenin Blanc on the front label of a wine of Sauvignon, and he had to declassify Sauvignon, because you could not call it Chenin Blanc and Sauvignon simultaneously. You were Sauvignon, you could not be called Chenin Blanc. That's still to this day.
Was they ashamed of it? Was that the reason why?
I have no idea. It was the French law. It was what their great grandfathers did. So they were respecting their great grandfather's wishes. I don't know what they were doing, but he then went a step further. And is an inimitable French man. He said, Chenin Blanc is perfect for sushi. The sushi food is sushi wine, and make a Chenin Blanc with a label sushi wine. And he made up a Chenin Blanc, sushi wine, Chenin Blanc, and he took it to all the sushi restaurants in France, in Paris, started selling, and the Loire guys kicked him out. They literally revolted. They're just like, out, dude, out. You're like, what are you doing? You're destroying the good name of the Loire Valley. And he was like, I'm selling wine to the masses. What do you want to do? And he was just that far ahead of his time. Love the character, love his resilient kind of up your attitude. And he was just had a thing going. I came back here and I was saying to people, so we've got Chenin Blanc planted and nobody takes this stuff seriously. While I was with him, I drank a Chenin Blanc from 1947, pulled out of his cellar in Chateau de Fel, 1947 Chenin Blanc, back in 1995, 96. So, I mean, it was nearly 40 years old, this wine. I mean, 50 years old, unbelievable wine. And I could not believe that a white wine could possibly last. And it's just this incredible, incredible grape. I came back with renewed vigor, and where I had been advised by many people to pull out the Chenin Blanc, plant Sauvignon Blanc, because the market's looking for Sauvignon. And that's what you'll always be able to make, average Sauvignon. People love Sauvignon. Who the hell gets out of bed to be average? What do you want to do that for? That didn't seem like a terribly good idea. So I figured that the way I want to do it is go Chenin Blanc and we'll make something out of this Chenin Blanc. The workhorse of the South African wine industry. I started fermenting Chenin Blanc in new, not a lot, 20% new French oak barrels. Every year, I'd kind of bring in 8 new barrels, until I had like 5 years of oak, and then take out the 5-year-old barrels and bring in 8 new barrels. And that was my regime for the Chenin, to get some new oak. But you don't pick it up. You don't see the oak. You don't feel it. You don't get that woodiness on the wine at all, because it's big barrels, 400-liter barrels. So the size of the barrel and the surface area means you've got a lot more wine in a 400-liter, double as much as you have in a 225, and the surface area is not much bigger. So you have a lot more kind of dilution. You don't feel the oak as tough as you would. And so by using oak gently for fermentation, and also fermenting Chenin in tank, and then blending tank fermented and barrel fermented, and hand harvesting comes into this, because the tank fermented Chenin harvested by hand is all of the fruit on the sunny side of the vineyard. Your vineyard's planted in a hedgerow. Only one side sees the late afternoon sun. The other side sees the early morning sun. You don't go bathing. You don't go sunbathing early morning, because there ain't no sunshine. You go sunbathing in the afternoon when it's good and warm, and that's the hot sun side. So we pick that by hand, and no machine knows how to harvest half a vineyard, the left half or the right half. Machine can harvest the first half or the last half, but it can't pick one side or the other side. It harvests both sides simultaneously. So once again, hand harvesting comes into this. We harvest all of the fruit on the sunny side of the vine. We pick all of that fruit. All of those berries that have seen direct sunshine have a slightly more yellow golden color to them, and they riper, and they have a different flavor to them. And yet, if you pick that bunch up and look underneath, ain't seen no sunshine, baby. The sunshine happened on the front of the berry, not on the back. Like lying in the sun getting a tan, you lie on your tummy, you tan your back. You can't tan your tummy while you're lying on your tummy. That's the way it works. And so we would pick this
So you're
fruit.
so wise, Ken. You're so wise. You're right. You can't tan your belly if you're lying on your belly. Yeah, okay.
A figure. And so only one side of the bunch gets tanned. So we've got a problem. We've got to think about this, because every one of these bunches is variable. You've got one side that's roasted, one side that's green. I want all of that fruit in stainless steel, where I can control the temperature of the fermentation. I've got a big lever there. I've got a massive cooling plant behind me. I go whoosh, bring the temperature down, control the temperature, keep that cool while it's fermenting, preserve the fruit, keep the freshness available, and then use that later to bring freshness to the wine that I've fermented in the barrels. And this is the result.
It is a beautiful harmony of that, where you have the ripeness of that sun blushed fruit, if you like, and then the freshness of the untouched, the pale belly, if you like, of it, and then it gets combined together in stainless steel, where they can both harmoniously work together. I'm guessing, considering you're not putting any minimal, if any, on this Chenin, Ken, any oak whatsoever.
No, this goes into that 5-barrel Criadera, where we start off in 20% new oak, and second fill, third fill, fourth fill, fifth fill. Take out the 5-year-old barrels, 20% new oak. So 50% of this wine sees oak, and 50% sees 20% or 50%, i.e. 10% sees new oak.
Right, fantastic. But there's a little dissect with you, will you there? Because there's more, there's plenty of color on this one, isn't there?
Yeah, there is a little bit of the oak shining through for me. There's a little bit of that, almost like a cloviness. There's a little bit of vanilla, really honeyed wine, almost honeycomb.
That's a great word for it.
Or ripe tree fruits. What I always get from Chenin Blanc is like peach and nectarine in particular. It's something that I eat actually quite quite a lot of recently. My kids have fallen in love with it. When we went to Wales this year on holiday, and we bought some organic nectarines, which were £1 each.
As in a pound in weight?
No, £1 as in price. And
Right,
they were the most incredible nectarines that they've ever tasted. And they were like, we love nectarines now. And every time we go to Tesco and buy them, they're not the same. But that stone fruit kind of appeal. There's also a really beautiful minerality here. You know, that sort of chalkiness. Smells amazing. Let's have a little taste. Not that I've already had a taste.
Yeah, everybody at home's already had a taste as well. Listening to us wang on, Ken. Everybody's already. What does it sound like? Okay.
Citrus as well, sherbety, lemon peel. The texture is just incredible of this wine. So rounded, coats your palate. Very fruit friendly wine as well.
It's funny.
Necessarily classed as a sushi wine, maybe.
Oh, you push back. Well, I think there was the Loire Shannon that was the sushi wine, perhaps, rather than this one. Lemon sherbets almost feels fizzy, says Sarah. Liz and Paul have also got some stories about when they were in South Africa, and whenever they mentioned Ken, which they did a lot because they are huge fans. It was always greeted with the King of Shannon.
The King of Shannon. Yeah, gorgeous. This is not the cheapest in your range, though, right? There is another range that is not on display today, but it's the petite range.
Yeah,
I hear that's one of your favorite wines. Is it not, Ken?
You know, that Petty Shannon. The petty range. We were doing this Chenin Blanc into Oddbins 25 years ago, and we were doing a chunk of it. We were doing a load of it. And Steve Daniel, the buyer for Oddbins, says, we really love that Chenin, but we'd love you to do a Chenin. Man, we need something at about half that price. I said, oh, Steve, that's going to be tough. You know, typical big buyer. And he said, we want the kind of South African sunshine, ripeness, we want freshness, crispness. Don't make it completely dry. Leave a little bit of residual sugar on that, just below perception at about 4 grams. And give us a kind of no oak, fresh, crunchy Chenin. I said, Steve, I don't know if I can do that. He said, look, first order, it might be about 4,000 or 5,000 cases. I said, now that you've
all right, okay, I'll do it, no problem.
Let me go right on that for you.
So we started making Petty Chenin. Petty Chenin is just, people ask a question that's a great oxymoron. It's like, can you name an intelligent government? But you can't use those two words in one sentence. But that sort of oxymoron, they say, what is your best wine? Which wine do you sell the most of? Well, your best wine is not necessarily the one you sell the most of, except in this case, I believe it might be. Because Petty Chenin, we make a ton of Petty Chenin. We make big tanks of Petty Chenin. And it's the kind of wine that I call my 100-point wine. And that's not arrogant. It's people want to get home from work. They want to get up from their desk, get out of the computer phase, get into the fridge, open a bottle, put out a glass, pour, and have a sip and go, phew, nice. And if they can say, nice, that's got to be 100 points. What did you expect? What did you get? Delivery and fulfillment, to my mind, is 100%. And if that's what you get,
what it says on the bottle.
It does what it says on the bottle. And Petty Chenin, at the price point, I think it's arguably about the best value white wine out there. It cracks with value. It's kind of easy drinking. It doesn't interrogate you. And quite frankly, nobody needs to be interrogated by a bottle of wine. Sometimes you need wine. Wine is the social lubricant. It's just what you have with friends. It's a cool glass of wine to have. It's a little bit of alcohol to kind of get the edge off. You don't want to think about it or write an exam on it or geek out about it. You know, we can all give you the pH of wine. Who's interested? Who wants to know? Have a good drink. You know, just cheers. That's what it's all about.
I've got to be honest with you, Ken. There are people on this tasting that do want to know. So they've got their WSET coming up, haven't they? So they do definitely want to know. I do agree. It's funny, and it might be through the social engineering of having done all these things. But the most popular. The wine that we sell of yours that we sell the most of is the wine that we're going to move on to now, which is the FMC. That is the one that moves the most. It is.
4-4.
It is by far our favorite. I personally class this, and without wishing to, demean myself, this is my favorite white wine in the world.
I'm so grateful. I
You
love
said something different earlier to me.
I love the fact love the fact that you pour this wine. There's an absolutely green hue. Look at that.
Yeah,
There's a green color through the wine. It's
is.
golden. It's got a lot of gold, but it's green gold. It's not brown gold. There's an absolute green hue in this wine. I just love that green hue because it tells me about the youth of the wine. It tells me how young this wine is. And I've got these wines going back. We've been doing this. We've been doing this for 21 years, since 2002, since 2000 and 2000 and zip. We started making FMC in the year 2000. And even those wines, they've lost some of that green, but they still have a hint of green on them. And you can see how that green turns to brown as it gets older. And these to golden. This wine is so young. This wine is but a child. It's a puppy. This needs another 4 years before it even starts to show. And you'll pick up a chalkiness on your teeth. You can rub your tongue and your teeth after you've had a sip of this wine, and there's an absolute chalkiness. This wine has a texture. I have so many people say to me, I don't drink white wine. I only drink reds, but I love this wine. They love it because of the extract and texture. And if you put this wine into a black Riedel tasting glass, those very clever little black glasses, people don't pick it as a white wine. Weird, they don't.
Oh, I'd be interested to try to do that experiment. Ours here has got just a hint of oxidization, just a hit. There's like a sherry note coming through from it. It's so generous on the nose. It's so enveloping and inviting.
There's loads going on. It's an incredibly complex wine on the nose. There's like, for me, there's like a real lactic sort of like acid kind of aroma that's really jumping out of the glass. It reminds me of peach yogurt,
Yeah.
Or like what's the stuff that I'm drinking recently from my heartburn? Kefir, a peach kefir.
Imagine if you could drink FMC for your heartburn.
Oh man, that would be fantastic.
You'd be bankrupt.
But there's also like candied ginger, candied lemon, dried apricot.
Ginger.
Do you know what I mean?
Ginger is the forgotten spice, right? When you're cooking and you use more garlic than you use a body weight in garlic. But the minute you start using ginger, all of a sudden it just jumps to a different level of dish. It is just amazing.
Well, my partner is Cantonese, so whenever I go and eat with my in-laws, it's ginger is in everything. So it's something I pick up quite easily because I'm really familiar with the flavor. But yeah, there's the
candied sugared ginger.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, there's also notes of toffee, honey again. The
fact we haven't drunk it tells you how generous on the nose.
It fills the room with aroma. You could just smell this wine, and every single time you visit the glass, there's something else that's sort of like whispering at you.
There is one thing underneath all of this, which is whispering, and that is botrytis. That is that little touch, Tokai Sauterne, that little hint of something that just creeps in underneath and just pokes its head above and says, "Hey, I'm here. Remember me?" It's just a whisper. How much botrytis fruit goes into this, Ken?
That's the question, Tom, and I don't know the answer.
Okay, cool. That's fine that we don't know then.
Enough.
I didn't go to wine school. If I'd gone to wine school, they would have taught me that botrytis is bad stuff, and you never ferment botrytis dry, and you cut it out of your fermentations. You separate it. You take it off your harvest. You don't include it. I'm going kind of from a chef's perspective. I'm saying, so what I have in front of me is botrytis, and this is essentially the essence of Chenin Blanc. 1 million microscopic mushrooms have taken put their foot through the skin of the grape into the grape and sucked all the juice out of the grape, left that grape with all of its acidity, all of its flavor, all of its fruit, all of its sugar, and just taken the water out. What I'm left with is the essence of Chenin Blanc. Would I like to add Chenin Blanc essence to my wine? I'm going, whoopee-doo. Yes, I do. That's exactly what I'd like to do.
Super concentrated Chenin Blanc to your Chenin to make your Chenin more Chenin-y. It sounds like
Shenception.
No, Shenception. All right. I was gonna go for a. We heard you like Chenin, so we added some Chenin to your Chenin to make your Chenin more Chenin-y. What was that TV program with the exhibit and the cars?
Pimp My Ride.
Pimp My Ride. All right, all going over everybody's head apart from me and Baz.
Yeah.
Larden says FMC is the best wine ever. Jason and Claire say agree, and Joel says correct, Larden. So there you go. For FMC for the win.
Gracias. But any chef worth his sauce has made a stock pot and taken that stock pot and reduced it to the point where you get a sauce that is sticky on your teeth because it's an essence of the flavor that he wants to create. And that's what I thought. If I could get that essence into a Chenin Blanc, how great would my Chenin Blanc be? And it strikes me, it reminds me of Spike Milligan's words. And Spike Milligan would say, if I could write words like leaves on an autumn forest floor, what a bonfire my books would make.
Nice. The other Spike Milligan quote, for me, the best Spike Milligan quote that's ever made is on his tombstone, where it says, "I told you I was ill."
Yeah.
It was a hard day for my parents as 3 military policemen dragged me screaming from under the bed. They put me on a train and gave me a picture of Hitler marked, "This is your enemy," a white feather and a train ticket to Bexhall. It wasn't easy to get off because the train didn't stop there. When the sergeant major said, "You're late," I said, "Not to worry, Sergeant Major, I'll fight nights as well." He switched on a 40-watt light globe that made the room darker.
Amazing. His writing is quite glorious. And alongside, I think it was his short stories. Because he fought in Africa, did he not? I remember there was one. Is it a Spike Milligan short story where it talks about a mamba, a black mamba, taking the milk from a cow from this series of short stories that he wrote. It's just breathtaking stuff. Amazing.
Wonderful.
We're off on a tangent once again, Ken, which I think is the kind of we should do this on a regular basis. So the FMC we went through last time. I think it probably bears repeating just slightly that how the name comes about.
It wasn't an instant success either, was it?
No, from what I understand is you bollocksed up about 3 vintages in a row, and then we're like, oh fuck, what am I going to do here? And your good friend and legendary South African winemaker Martin Maynard stepped in and told you what to do.
And we got to the London Wine Trade Fair. And Matthew Jukes, who still writes, he's still a wine journal, he's taken on Australia as a basket case to help them out. And Jukes, he's a great guy, but he's a Duracell bunny. He never asks one question. He asks a dozen questions all at once. Ken, how are you? How's the wife? How are the kids doing? What have you been doing lately? Tell me, how many dogs have you got? Have you traveled? Have you been traveling? And Matthew, I go, well, just let me answer one of these. I'll get to you. And he's like, "Have you got something special?" And I pulled this out from under the table at the London Wine Trade Fair in Olympia back in those days, when it was in Olympia, before it went out to the docks and came back to Olympia. And I said to him, "Here, what, Jukes, you try this." And he tastes this. He goes, "Well, this could be my white wine of the show." And he gets hold of Oz Clark. He brings him over to the stand. "Oz, this is my white wine. I found this white wine." And he says to me, "So it's a blend, obviously. What's in it?" So I said, "No, it's Chenin Blanc, 100% Chenin Blanc." "And you blended?" I said, "No, we didn't blend nothing." He says, "In that case, I got to tell you, this is the most fucking marvelous Chenin Blanc I've ever tasted." I said, "Matthew, I think I could put that on the label." So we did. We called it the FMC.
Amazing. For the PG audience, Forrest and Maynard Chenin, but for everybody else,
nobody's PG.
Fucking marvelous Chenin, this stuff. Oh, dear me. Absolutely amazing. I do love how there is a thread that runs through the old vine into the FMC. That there is, it's not now just this syrupy, botryticized, monster. There is still the freshness that comes through it, and I think that's absolutely crucial. It's still got that acidity that keeps it bright. The finish isn't a claggy one, despite the fact that it is so unctuous and 3 years we've been doing these tastings nearly. I still unguent. Unctuous and unguent, that kind of like
I don't know what that means, so I'm going to take it as offense.
That's a good quote. That's a good quote. Yeah,
Find that word.
That, so dictionary. Well, you got Baz who's doing this in the second language. So
yeah. In Holland we say lekker.
You do quite a lot. The thread that runs through it is great. There is something that we haven't mentioned here, which is, of course, that apple pie, baked vanilla, crumble, demerara sugar crusted, sort of just freshly like a fucking cartoon. This is the apple pie.
Put on the windowsill,
cooling on the windowsill, so that the cartoon characters can.
The fumes turn into hands, and they pull him like that. That's it. Outstanding.
Delicious. Right. So Sarah says late to agreeing that FMC is the best because she was just ordering some. So well done. I hope you used Ken 20 to get 20% off.
I didn't agree.
Natalie says you never do. Natalie says pineapple cubes, the old style sweeties, the soft ones or the hard ones? The hard ones, right? The ones that
in Holland we only had licorice, so I don't know what those are.
Disgusting, salty licorice crap. Yeah, okay. Delicious. The hard style, yeah, the one that crack under your tooth and sometimes crack your tooth. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I heard about those.
Fantastic. Right, okay, so we're now going to move on to the bonus bottles for those of you that went for it, which is pretty much everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been a good.
Well, we're going to talk about
last time we only spoke about this, and it was almost like a reveal for us, and then we made it our mission to actually get our hands on some of this, and the beautiful distributors here in the UK who distribute your wine have got their hands on some of this, but it was an allocation, and us being us, we were able to get.
We were like, "Hey, listen, Ken's joining us from fucking South Africa. Can we get some of this wine?" And they're like, "Yeah, okay, that's fine." And everybody watching along has come along for this ride. So
lots of people have just had the 250 ml, so it might be.
So Ken actually just did. He just did it there. It is a stunning bottle. It comes in this beautiful, beautiful box. In that box, I picked the one that doesn't fucking have.
I was reading the scroll.
There is a little scroll that comes in the box. So if you went for the full bottle, you will have got that as well.
It tells you the story.
The story of this wine, which I'm obviously not going to read because we've got the guy that made the fucking wine. So we're going to get him to explain how this came about. What was fascinating was what Barry described to me. So firstly, this is minimal intervention Chenin Blanc, mainly from Picaneerskluft. Is that right? Minimal intervention, what some people would perhaps label as natural wine.
Yeah. But
we would just say minimal intervention because the implication is that all other wine that you make is not natural, which is not the case. The way that Barry described this to me is that you kind of treat this a little bit like a non-vintage champagne because this doesn't have a vintage.
Look at the color on that.
This just has the word 3. So Ken, begin at the beginning. Tell us about the dirty little secret that is your dirty little secret.
So being a dirty little secret, dirty because the wine is unfiltered and unfined. And frankly, I was kind of taking umbrage. I love the youngsters. I love my kids. I've got 2 daughters who are around about 30 years old. Their friends are so damn smart. I mean, every one of their parents, us, have made sure our kids are better educated than us. They've grown up in a much smarter environment, a much quicker environment, a much more connected environment. They've got phones and and everything else. And these kids are sharp. I mean, they're 100% brilliant. I just love, and I love learning from them, but I don't want to put up with their BS either. When I'm kind of sitting down and I get a glass of dirty, cloudy wine, and I say to a winemaker, dude, what happened to this? He goes, hey, no, man, you don't understand. That's natural. I'm going, mm-mm.
I love the idea that a winemaker would turn around to Ken Forrest and say, no, you don't understand. No, mate, I fucking understand perfectly well, actually.
No, 100%, full on. No, these kids are so connected. They're so switched on. I mean, who the hell are we? Like, I got no credibility, no street cred at all. And so they say, no. I said, now explain to me now, why is it cloudy? He said, I told you before, it's natural, not filtered. I go, no. You don't understand the question. I have a whole lot of wine in my cellar. It's never seen a filter, never going to see a filter, and it's not cloudy. It's settled clear because I told you about that little dance, that little ballet of all the layers coming through, and that leaves the wine crystal clear. But you can't touch what's at the bottom of the barrel because there's even an expression about, oh, that's from the bottom of the barrel. We don't want the bottom of the barrel. You leave that alone.
If Grace is downstairs in our presswood shop right now, and she's probably fuming, but also recognizes that what you're saying is absolutely gospel and correct. She's downstairs going, oh, God, I wish it wasn't right. Ken, carry on.
So I decided I wanted to make a natural wine, and kind of find out why these guys were having difficulty with clarity, etc. And so I thought I wanted to be a step beyond that. I wanted to have more to it. So what if I find a vineyard, a particularly special vineyard, and then like today's really modern cameras, where you're shooting without a mirror, you're getting kind of 20 or 30 frames per second, and you're putting these frames together in one picture. I want that complexity in a wine, and I've got to do that across 3 or 4 or 5 vintages to get my frames to make one picture. And so I thought, what I'm going to do is look at a site and find the greatest site and then work out how to produce a wine from this site so that every batch that I release shows you the thread through that this is exactly where it comes from. And it's not interfered with by one good vintage, one bad vintage. What it is a selection of the best barrels of this site. And to date, we kind of have bottled about 20% of what we harvest. We bottle about 2,000 bottles in a batch. And this is batch number 3 in 6 years. So we've had 6,000 bottles in 6 years. About 1,000 bottles a year is the production that we have. And this wine is unfiltered, unfined. It's crystal clear. Well, it's not really. It's actually got a little cloudiness in it, which I love. And if you look at it, it looks clear, but it's not star bright. And at the same time, it has wonderful, wonderful life in the wine.
Yeah, I was gonna say exactly that. It bounces, it vibrates out of the fucking glass. It might have a very gentle haze, but I mean, you've got to be really attentive to see that. It does literally vibrate out the glass. It's just so intriguing.
The color's almost fluorescent.
Yeah.
That color, does that come from the amount of reserve wines that are in this blend, that it's so incredibly vibrant?
We're sitting with 5 vintages in this blend. And these wines sit in barrel the whole time. So they're not, I mean, this is all old wood. The fermentation is in barrel, in old barrel. It's all wild yeast ferment. It all goes through malolactic. So everything goes through mallow. And it's a full, the whole 9 yards. This is what people talk about, minimal intervention. This is zip intervention. We don't intervene in this
so
wine.
Is it spontaneous malolactic that's occurring then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oof. Absolutely. 100%. And I have to
go on. Sorry.
The wine has an incredible life. It has an incredible brightness. It has a wonderful, it has a life of its own. The wine really does shine out. And there's a lot to be said.
Unbelievable.
Shit.
Is this your
I love
top-end wine as
FMC
well?
because it's the best white wine that you can get for sub 50 quid, and now this one is 90 quid, and it's fucking amazing.
Tom has a distinctive dislike to anything natural, though. I mean, on paper, this should not be your jam,
but I think is the difference between a trite, slightly juvenile, narcissistic. Oh, we're doing this because we're something, and you don't get it. You're legacy winemaker. You've been doing this for however long. You're stuck in your ways and all the rest of it. And you're like, no, motherfucker. I can make a natural wine better than. I'm not saying you have this relationship with them, and I'm not saying that there's that kind of friction or argumentative thing, but just the idea that you don't know what you've been doing. Now, people have been making wine and perfecting the techniques of making wine for millennia. We've been getting better and better and better as we go along. There have been some dead ends where people have used oak essence or stave caves or poorly made fruit and overly sugared, whatever it might be. There've been some false starts, but essentially we've been getting better and better and better. And the idea that somebody that's been making wine for X amount of time just doesn't get it, and that whatever, it's a little bit like it's like mezcal, like people that jumped all over mezcal like it was the greatest thing, and so much of it was shite. But because it was mezcal, and then all of a sudden it attained this kind of status, and it demeaned everything else that had been perfecting it slowly but surely over a lifetime of amassing knowledge. And to dismiss that, I think it's fucking rude.
I think if you're doing minimal intervention, but it's off a great vineyard, then fantastic, right? It's making the vineyard speak rather than if it's a poorly managed vineyard and you're doing minimal intervention, it's not going to taste very nice, is it?
Yeah, I've got some grapes. We'll make some minimal intervention wine. It's going to taste like cider. Oh, right, okay.
This is quite spectacular.
My whole view was to use this vineyard, and the vineyard is planted in 1959, like the Grenache vineyard. It's planted by the same woman, and it's planted on her own property. The Grenache is planted on another property about 5 miles away. This is at 600 meters above sea level. It looks down on the Atlantic coast. It faces out. The day-night temperature in this vineyard is a variation in centigrade of nearly 20 degrees. It's a massive day-night diurnal change, and that change leaves the vines every morning covered in dew. And you go up there in the morning, these vines are covered in dew. There's just no transpiration. They lose nothing. In fact, they gain water without irrigation because the leaves are wet until about midday, and they slowly dry out, and then they get dewed the next morning. So it's a completely different. What happens to these vines is quite special. Really,
I'm just going to ask that: is there real risk of disease pressure on the vines if there's that much dew every single morning? But then I remember that this is South Africa, China. So by midday, it's like boom.
Sunshine, brilliant, bright sunshine by midday, and it's at 600 meters high, wind blowing, it's cool, and it's an insane sight. It's an insane sight. This part of the world.
One of my abiding memories of being in the Kruger and on the safari. You wake up in the morning, you have a coffee and a rusk biscuit, this really, really hard tack biscuit, right? Have that, smoke a cigarette, chat to the guide, and then you go out walking. And as you were walking, your legs, if you're wearing trousers, were soaking wet. If you're wearing shorts, then your legs were dripping with the dew that was everywhere. This amazing blue African early morning sun. But by midday, not only were your legs dry, everything was dry. You were dry. You had no sweat left to give, Carry on, Ken.
This is a real special vineyard. And I wanted to show off the vineyard. I wanted to pack together. And if you have a look on that cork of the Dirty Little Secret, there's a seemingly random list of numbers. That random list of numbers is all of the barrels involved in that blend.
So is this 20 plus 17 plus 18 plus 19 plus 20 times 0.5?
I needed a half barrel.
Let me just quickly show that to people.
So there's the vintages, are there?
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
So if you guys can see there. So Ken, talk us through these numbers. What do they mean?
So the 20 was, I started off with the fresh young juice and I added to it the older juice, 19, 18, 17. I put this blend together and then I figured out I needed more of the fresh young juice because I wanted that fresh acidity. So I added a half barrel of the 20 at the end.
And you put it on the cork just for fucking dweebs like us to pick up on.
I love it. I love it. That's incredible.
It was a great choice as well. It's been borne out because the wine has that laser-like acidity from that extra youthful wine added to it.
It's incredible. Have you ever tried doing this with your like being experimental with your own sort of single vineyard where you make the FMC from to try and do something like this?
The FMC
sells out every year, so you don't have to do it.
It's got its own personality. An FMC is about achieving the best I can out of the vineyard in one vintage. And that's a challenge all on its own. We used to pick the FMC vineyard 4 or 5 times, and we fly over that vineyard and we do a thing called NDVI. I think I told you last time we were here. We do NDVI, normalized density vegetative index, for whatever it's called. And that NDVI gives us a picture which looks like that, a picture of the vineyard.
I appreciate that, Ken, because I managed to lose the pictures that Alette sent us through last time. So
So
what happened?
Gives us a picture of the vineyard, and within that we can see the vineyard was all planted in 1970, and it was all identical. It was all planted from signed material. Everything is a cutting of it's all the same material. So it's really, vineyards are absolutely homogeneous. But what happens over time, depending on where they're grown, is that vineyard across a space in the one corner where the rainfall falls on the road around that corner, that 6-meter wide road will drain all of its rainfall in the winter into the first 9 rows of the vineyard closest to it. And eventually that drainage causes a different pattern for the root growth. But in the 10th row, 11th row, 12th row, that doesn't affect it because at that point, all of that drainage is gone already. So you end up looking at a vineyard that is all different parts. Imagine twins born on the same day to the same mother, identical. One of them becomes Martin Johnson and his brother is a concert violinist. But by the time they're 50 years old, they look quite different, and that's exactly what happened.
My favorite thing about when you told us this initially last time was the fact that it was done, the technology was developed in order to catch Viet Cong deforesting areas in Vietnam, or the Russians decided that they were going to build something in a forest in the Ural Mountains or whatever. And these geocentric, not geocentric, Joel, you're a science nerd, you'll know what I'm trying to say, but on the same latitude or longitude, but constantly rotating the earth. And whenever it picked up a slight difference in vegetation, a change from the last time it passed over that exact region, an alarm went off and it was like, hey, something's going on here, you need to check it out. And you then have harnessed that technology that was used to, catch whatever sort of commies in the 60s or something. And you're now using it to see how the vegetation is happening on a almost subterranean versus terranean level. How is this reacting? And that then completely affects how you pick the wine. It's just such a collision of two worlds that I would no more have expected to collide together. Anti-communist spy camera technology and South African winemaking, and it's just collided together in the most glorious and unexpected way. It just blows my mind. It's so cool.
And Tom, it's got even better. It's got even better because we no longer fly a Cessna with a camera which has nearly a 2-foot lens. We now fly a drone, and that drone has
there you go,
all kinds of capabilities beyond those old cameras. That drone is heat seeking. It can also sense the difference in temperatures in the soil caused by a leak in your irrigation system, that it can tell you that the reason that there's a variation in a row of vines is because you have a leak in your irrigation system and you're creating more water. And so we're into a whole new realm. We are currently now talking with an agronomist. We're talking about 3 computer programmers. We're talking with a drone pilot, and we're putting this together with 5 vineyard managers as a little mini conference of 5 people, with one guy who flies his drone across all of our vineyards, that we can cross-question each other and find out the answers as to what's happening in all of the spheres of the vineyard. This stuff has moved into a new realm beyond. I mean, I love data. I think that data is brilliant, but data is like a sack of manure. You could keep that sack of manure in your bedroom and it's going to do no good at all for 100 years. You need to spread it out. You need to get it to work. You need to dig it into the soil. And we need to somehow deal with the data. We need to somehow get into this data and unpick this data and get it into the soil. And we need to find out what the hell this data really means, because data on its own is pretty unimpressive stuff.
See, there's a corollary, I think, with something we spoke about last time as well, which is the use of Stelvin as opposed to cork. And you haven't gone with Stelvin for this one. Yeah. I'll ask you why in a minute. But the idea that you stick with cork because cork is classic and traditional, whereas you know as a winemaker, we know as consumers, well, those of us that do like that, if you lose 8% of your inventory to corkage, to cork-taint oxidization, that's going to send up the price. Therefore, end users are going to pay for that, and you're going to lose stock and all the rest of it. So it makes more sense to use something like this, the perfect possible closure. But there is also a kind of a subculture, isn't there, within the wine world, which is that, well, no, it's romantic and it's classic and it's just you know, you should have that. It's almost part of it. Is there any pushback from, I guess it's maybe different old world versus new world? Do you find that there's a bit of like, oh no, this is how we do it because it's romantic even though it's inefficient, because it's classic even though it's counterintuitive, and maybe the removal of some of the luck, because if you didn't know what was coming from 3 fields over until you saw this, you know, subterranean infrared, camera, you didn't know that, you would think it was because of something else. Is there any pushback on that, or is there a embracing of new technology? What?
More and more people are accepting closure as the closure. They don't mind. The fact that we use, and I'm going to say this quietly, what looks like a cork in The Dirty Little Secret, it's not cork. It is a technical closure that looks like cork. And that satisfies 99% of people who want cork, because the fact that it is a projectile punched into the top of the bottle and the shape and the style of cork, it's made of cork. It looks like cork. It's called diam or diam, and the diam technology is brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. And you have no TCA risk. You have no danger of unreliable natural.
Can you explain to everybody at home
I have nothing
what TCA stands for, Ken? Can you just explain what TCA means?
TCA, trichloroanazole 14. It's a trichloroanazole. It's a 3,4,6 complex compound that comes from chlorides, which are used for purifying and cleaning cork up so that you could use it as food grade standard. Because cork, remember, is the bark of a tree that some bird has sat on for the last 10 years. and you know, if a bird's going to be sitting on your bark for 10 years, you do need to clean it to a point where it's food grade and safety clean, and chlorides are the best way to do that. But cork's hollow, and it retains some of those chlorides in those hollow portions, and that it'll release the chloride as a trichloroanisole. And that trichloroanisole is that delightful smell of wet dog that destroys the bottle of wine that you're drinking. It's not pleasant. It's really not what you want. And to many people, to members of the public who really don't deserve to have to know about the science of wine. I mean, who knows the science of a Gucci handbag? And why would you have to know the science of a Gucci handbag to drop 50 grand on a handbag? Nobody knows the science. You know, it's Gucci. It's good enough for me. Nobody asks if it's Northern Hemisphere leather or Southern Hemisphere leather, whether it was, whether the animal was slaughtered under a full moon, or whether the leather was tanned organically, or whether it was vegetable dye, and how thick was the leather. Nobody gives a damn. It's Gucci handbag. It's Gucci. It's a Fendi. It is what it is. And yet we expect people to have all this knowledge about wine. You don't have to have knowledge about wine. You're quite entitled to drink wine that you like. I've always said that. And at the end of the day, when we get back to what's important in wine, it really goes around, and the closures of wine, it goes around the fact that you are happy with it. So if you don't know much about it, but you love buying really lovely, expensive wine, and you get a terribly corked bottle, you might be very disappointed in the winemaker. It's not his fault. It is his fault because he chose bad closure.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of his fault a little bit, yeah.
He chose a bad closure, and why would anybody who spent a whole year growing the grapes, another 2 or 3 years making the wine, keeping it in oak, keeping it in barrel, and then putting it into a bottle and keeping it in his cellar, and then finally releasing it, imagine that wine at that point is spoiled by this little piece of bark stuck in the top of the bottle. And the bark wasn't even yours, doesn't come from your tree, you didn't grow it. It has nothing to do with the place where the wine comes from. It comes from Spain or Portugal. It's a piece of bark. And they were a great idea. Corks were a perfectly good idea. They were like drum brakes on the ox wagon or on an old horse buggy. Today we're a little more
perfect for the time, but now we've got fucking Teslas and people going to space recreationally. We could probably find a better closure for a bottle of wine than a piece of wood.
100%. 100%.
This is a genuinely fascinating wine. Really, really interesting. It's got a lovely texture. It's still it is zingy, zippy, and energetic, whilst still retaining. There's no hint of botrytis in it at all, because it's not the FMC. It's not.
No, nothing.
It's not.
No.
It is. Ken, we're losing you.
I hope not.
Ken, come back.
Two wines, very different. Hello.
We got you back. We got you back, baby.
I won't move. I'll just sit in one place.
Yeah, we'll do it as well. Everybody at home we'll just freak out. Yeah, how are you even getting Wi-Fi in this enormous Dutch castle in South Africa? I bring it up just purely because this is the reason why we've done it this way round. At your request has really borne fruit, because there is a thread that runs all the way through this. There is the bright pure Chenin, then there is the adulterated, forgive my use of that word, there is the ameliorated Chenin in the FMC, and now we're going back to Chenin, but using a technique I've never seen in still wine, like a non-vintage champagne, taking the best of different vintages and combining it together. Really fascinating. And that's why you call the King of Chenin, isn't it? You know what I mean? Because he smashes it.
I think we've got one more wine to do that, Tom.
We got one more wine to do. This little sparkle book
Sparkle horse, my bro.
And if you were to call Chenin Blanc the workhorse grape of South Africa and go from a workhorse grape to a sparkling wine,
you really, bit of ASMR.
A small leap from workhorse to sparkle horse. And I made this wine thinking I'd really like to make some sparkling Chenin. And we were walking, my wife and I, we were in London, we were walking along the South Bank, and we were walking from Borough Market up to the Tate. And we came across, they just repaved that whole area and pedestrianized it and trying to make it pedestrian friendly. And they had a carousel. And we walked up towards that carousel. And that was me in 2013 at the carousel.
Not sporting a beard there, Ken, I noticed. Is that a lockdown choice?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it might have been. But that was literally where the sparkle horse idea emerged, was looking at that carousel and saying, I want that as a label. I want to get those horses, these horses, and that's literally what the label is on the sparkle.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
So talk us through, because this is something which is MCC or Method Cap Classique. Can you talk us through the category as well as your specific wine? Because people people have preconceptions about sparkling wine. A lot of people, particularly guys and girls on our tastings, they'll maybe know the difference between a secondary fermentation in the bottle versus Charmat or whatever. MCC or Method Cap Classique is something. Is it uniquely South African?
No, Method Cap Classique is essentially French. It is a méthode champenoise. So it's exactly the same method as Champagne, except Champagne is now a protected region, a protected geographical region. We may not say méthode champenoise, so we have to create our own name for it. Very much like English sparkling wine can't say this is made like Champagne, this is méthode champenoise. They've got to find a name for English sparkling. And so we've called our sparkling wine, made in the same format, the same style as Champagne. We've called it Cap Classique. It used to be called Méthode Cap Classique, MCC. It's now simply CC. They've dropped the M. It's a Cap Classique. And Cap Classique means that the wine is fermented. The grapes are harvested, crushed, pressed, fermented in tank normally, perhaps in barrel, it's possible. And then after fermentation, they have to go through a malolactic fermentation to get a secondary fermentation to lower the acidity in the wine and to end up with a richer, fuller wine. That wine is then filtered, clarified, cleansed, purified, and ready to go into bottle. And literally the day that you're going to put it in bottle, you add a very carefully measured mixture of grape sugar and yeast to the tank, stir it into the tank, and pour that stuff into the bottle. And what you've done in rugby is called a hospital pass. You have just put sugar and yeast into wine in a bottle. That wine is going to re-ferment in the bottle. Your champagne bottle, any sparkling wine bottle, has a tolerance of 5 atmospheres. No, a bigger one, 7 atmospheres. 7 atmospheres. An atmosphere is 15 pounds per square inch, there or thereabouts. You pump your tires to 1.2, 1.4 atmospheres. It's kind of typically what you pump your tires to on your car. This is 7 atmospheres because that bottle has to withstand the pressure within, which is forced by carbon dioxide in the secondary fermentation. And when champagne, sparkling wine, is made, that bottle has a crown cork on it like a beer. And that lip, that round lip on every champagne bottle you have ever opened in your life is because the wine is fermented in that bottle with a crown cork. And after a period of time, once the fermentation is completed and the bottle has been inverted, as they turn the bottle upside down, what they do is they capture all the lees, all the dead yeast in the neck of the bottle. They freeze the neck of the bottle and then allow the neck of the bottle to come out as a solid plug when they open the crown cork, and then sacrifice certain bottles to top up the rest of the batch, and that becomes your Cap Classique Method Champenoise, your champagne method. That is the purest method today of making sparkling wine. But there are other methods. You could take a tank of wine, and as you have a soda stream at home, where you put a bottle of water into a gas cylinder and you allow carbon dioxide into the bottle, whoosh, then you create sparkling water. You can create sparkling wine. It's just a very gauche method of doing that, and you end up with a very coarse bubble, a very rough bubble. But
could we actually do that? Say if we put your Old Vine Reserve Chenin Blanc into a soda stream, we could make
we can make a TikTok about it, or something equally as fucking frivolous and ridiculous. We've just been removed from the come and visit us at the vineyard list, haven't we?
No, you've just been crossed off the guest list. I'm sorry.
Can I ask you something though, Ken? I've got a question about the Cap Classique. So in Champagne, there is the majority 3 grape varieties in Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Pinot Meunier. How does that work with Cap Classique? Is it only Chenin Blanc that's allowed, or are there other grape varieties that are allowed in this?
So Cap Classique is fighting like crazy to be only Chardonnay, Pinot Meunier, and Pinot Noir. And to the point where they've brought in a category called, Lees aged, or is an aging quote in the category. And to be in that category, you have to have been on the lees for 36 months, and you have to be either or all Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier. So you have to be a blend of any of those 3 or all of those 3. And that's now coming to light. But we've used Chenin Blanc. I was very surprised. I did a journey into the Loire Valley fairly recently, just before COVID. It's funny how the world has become, in my mind, before COVID and after COVID, BC and AC.
There's also DC, which was during COVID, which was an entirely, which is like a fog. It's so funny going back and watching as we did that. The tasting that we all did together in February 2021. Firstly, how fat we were. That was quite interesting.
Us, Ken, not you.
Yeah. But it's just that whole sort of central period is just a sort of a blur and a haze of, oh my God, what just mayhem. Crazy.
And changed our whole perception of time. I really have a battle remembering when things happened. And people talking about, how do you, and I go, no, he died 3 years ago. No, he died last year. I go, no, that's not possible. Or whatever. I mean, you just have weird recollections. I mean, it's messed with my whole time, how I measure what happened in my life. It's crazy. That's another matter.
How was it in South Africa? Because you guys were locked down so hard that like booze sales were outlawed.
Prohibition was put into place, right?
It was kind of crazy, right?
It was the best time and the worst time. I mean, the worst time and the best time. I mean, you got to look when you're dealing with a government made primarily of idiots who are creating rules and laws which are absolutely of no foundation. It's very difficult to respect those laws and those rules. And when they banned the export of alcohol, in case delivering alcohol to the harbor gave us COVID. And I was like, that's the end of that. It cost me a major listing. It was a serious issue. I ended up having to wear 140,000 liters of Chenin Blanc that was destined for a customer that I couldn't ship. And the customer said, if you can't ship, we'll get it from somebody else. I'm sorry, but we can't have empty shelves. And from that, we created a gin called Jackalberry Gin, but that's another story. But quite apart from that, what we did was, when they, in the second lockdown, said we could export, but we couldn't sell locally, that appealed to me. That really appealed to me, because I thought I could test the system. And what I did was created export documents to export wine. And I shouldn't be telling you this, but who knows?
I was going to say, some
Careful
shit
here.
is coming out now, Ken. You're going to get Cyril Maraposa is going to come knocking at Mister.
But let me put it this way. I've always had the view that an export is when wine, a case of wine, a bottle of wine, leaves my premises. It's been exported. I don't care less whether it's 5 kilometers or 5,000 kilometers. It's exported. It's off the property.
That's not what export means, Ken.
I created a small export opportunity. The destination may have been Johannesburg, which to my mind was an export. And I shipped a container, or might have shipped a container, to Johannesburg in the heart of lockdown, and with all of the required export papers. And it was stopped and duly searched and stamped and approved by the authorities because it had all the correct export documents. And the destination was Johannesburg. And it went to my best clients in Johannesburg, or it might have gone to my best clients in Johannesburg. Who knows?
Ken, as far as you're aware, it arrived to Johannesburg and was then immediately exited from the Republic of South Africa.
Well, that's a Johannesburg.
As far as you're aware.
Absolutely. Quite right.
Mind you, if you're crossing over into the GP, into Joburg, that is pretty much a different country, isn't it, compared to wine country?
It is. In my mind, yes. It would have been an export. It could have been an export. You know, it's the old, where is the boundary theory? That's where it lies. And it depends on who's drawing the boundaries. But at the end of the day, there were some very, very difficult laws for us to follow. And we were cognizant and we were mindful of the risks, and we were very seriously concerned about the risk. I mean, we took it very seriously. But by the time they got to the second lockdown, where they banned the sale of open-toed shoes, underwear, and rotisserie chickens for some reason, as well as
yeah, I mean, like, how do you handle that, right? How do you handle that? I mean, in Manchester, we had the strictest lockdowns in the whole of the UK for like something like, it's something crazy, like sort of 14 out of the 15 months of lockdown. We were in the strictest thing in it, and it's nice to be able to look at the future without having that shadow hanging over us. But at the same time, the last time we spoke, we were mid lockdown. We're now 18 months later on. How has life changed for you now? What's the next thing for you?
The biggest thing is I desperately wanted to understand how lockdown was going to translate into the future. And I suspected that the biggest change would be in property usage, in offices, in businesses, in corporates who no longer needed people to come into the city every day. You could work remotely. And I was quite sure that the biggest change would happen in cities that are going to slowly become repurposed as residential. I think we're going to find a lot of our big buildings in the cities around the world becoming residential, and that'll bring with it new restaurants, new coffee shops, new
communities,
new wine stores. It's going to create a whole subculture of all the stuff that supports all of those people. And I think that's positive. I think that's wonderful, because to imagine that you can create a building that you only use for 8 hours a day from 8 to 5, and then the building stands vacant for the next 18 hours or every day is absolutely wasteful. It's ridiculous. And particularly as the building sits with all its lights on all night long to show how you can
exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, exactly. It's not even like it's used for that period and then it sits empty. It's used for that period and then it just burns fuel to light it up for what particular purpose? You know, it's hard to tell. What's next for you though? What's next for Ken Forrester Wines?
Have you got anything else that's new? Like last time we spoke, you told us about
it was a breeding ground of new ideas. For us, it was a team stuck together, stuck closer. We might have been able to get documents for all of our staff as essential workers, because I got a document as an essential worker, and then I figured out your photocopy is your friend. So a lot of our staff had documents.
Brilliant.
Never change. TIA, my China. TIA.
and we sadly we were kind of chastised by neighbors, by people driving by, because we live on this property and we have 8 dogs. We take the dogs for a walk, and you're walking out with your dogs, where people staying in a communal property with like 30 or 50 or 100 apartments on a site weren't allowed to use the gardens. They weren't allowed to be out. I mean, this bizarre stupidity of COVID in retrospect, so you had your kind of neighbor looking at you out in the garden, reporting you for breaking COVID regulations and you're taking a dog for a walk. So we were walking our dogs on our property, and cars coming by honking at us because they were kind of like, how dare you walk out on your property? I'm like, yeah, sorry, it is what it is. But the team, all of us got together and spent time together and worked together. We kept every one of our staff members. We paid every one of our staff members 100% of their salary right through COVID. Nobody didn't get a full salary ever for 1 month. And that was my goal. That for me was an achievement all on its own. We didn't have government support. There was no government support, unlike the UK, where you had kind of furlough and pay 75% or whatever. We had zero government support. So we paid every one of our staff members, kept them going. And for that, I was in touch with them. And even if it meant being on Zoom, we were talking to each other, keeping each other, and getting them we had these certificates, as I said, so we were all essential workers. And we'd get into the winery, we'd get into the cellar, and we'd say, so what else can we do? And we've produced a whole lot of wine. We've got a whole lot of small batches, little batches of experimental stuff. We've got single vineyard Syrah, single vineyard Grenache, single vineyard Sanso. We've got a small batch of Pet Nat. We've got a Pet Nat. We've done Pet Nat from Grenache, Pet Nat from Chenin Blanc. We have a Sauvignon Blanc and a Chardonnay from a single vineyard. All of these are small projects where we're talking a kind of small number of bottles, 300-400 bottles. And I've got a youngster working with me, Sean Matthijs, young winemaker, kid that grew up in a disadvantaged background, been with me for 8 years. And I've given him a label. None of these wines fits into our range. So they're all misfits. So I've created a range called Misfits. And this is Sean's range. And this is his opportunity to express himself and to do small batch bottlings in the cellar, unfiltered, unfined, minimum intervention. So we've got to be pretty careful with the microbiology on these wines. We kind of look after them carefully and make sure the chemistry is sound. And he's putting all of this together. And this is the next stage for me of teaching him to stand on his own and not copy paste me, but create his own range of wine.
What a fantastic opportunity to understudy one of the great winemakers of your generation, which is an opportunity I'm sure that you won't spurn. Jason and Claire ask, have you got any new dogs? As we mentioned on the last one, you have a roving band that never falls below a certain amount, never exceeds another amount, because dogs come in and they leave. You are familiar with many dogs. You own very few. Do you have any more additions to the pack?
We haven't. We've sadly lost 2 in the last 2 years. 2 very special pooches that hurt so badly. We'd be just a little reluctant to take on new dogs for now. We're down to 6 at the minute, and that's all I can manage, all I can cope with emotionally right now. Just we'll probably find somebody young and find someone to help. We like taking on rescue dogs, and it's just they're so special. They really are amazing creatures. Love dogs, love them.
There's a thing in life. I think how people treat animals and waiters is a great way to analyze how good they are as a human being. How you treat those two categories of individual, I think, tells you an awful lot about you. And I think it tells us an awful lot about you, Ken. So, Ken, listen, we've monopolized your time for the last nearly 3 hours. It has been another
epic face.
We were rewatching the last one. We were like, oh, what are we going to talk about this time? Because we talked about so much stuff. How are we going to fill the time as last time? It was just effortless, an amazing thing. Should we do this again soon? I'd love to do this on a regular basis, just to have a chat with you, because you are genuinely fascinating, wonderful human being, inspirational, not just for the wine you produce, but how you do it and how you live your life over there. Some people are coming to see you soon, so I'll ask them to drop our name.
Is it okay if we link them up?
Guys, if you're headed this way, do me a favor, please just drop me a line, give me a call. It's all of our email addresses here refer to our names. I'm Ken at kenforresterwines.com. All of us are .com. It's kenforresterwines.com. Just drop me an email. Say, we're coming down, dates. We'd love to have you. Just refer to this. Refer to Grape and Grain. Just refer to Tom. Just say that that's where we were. We'd love to meet you. Love to see you. Please come on down.
Before you go, Ken, when are you coming to the UK next?
I've got some dates happening. I'm coming up for the decanter. We got that big gong for the decanter.
The best in the show, right?
Best in show for the Chenin Blanc. Yeah. So they've invited us to come up to their show on the 5th of November. So that weekend I'm down in London, but there's every chance somewhere around about the 7th or 8th of November I might be in your neck of the woods.
Do you fancy coming, see us in person?
We're going for dinner.
Otherwise we'll come and see you.
Let's go for
dinner. Let's have tea.
Sean says, bye, Ken. Next time in Prestwich. Jason Clare, lovely to see you, Ken. Amazing wine and tasting. Sean, absolutely brilliant tasting. Thank you so much. Lon, absolutely amazing. Thank you. Lizzie and Paul, who've been there, would recommend going to Ken's tasting, followed by Annandale Winery. We had the best morning. Lale has memorized your email address. Guys and girls, watching along on Zoom, do us a favor, everybody turn on your cameras and let us see your beautiful faces. Natalie says a visit would be amazing. Yeah, I've no doubt. I'm just going to remove the spotlights. Hopefully will oh god, what have I done? Remove spotlight. There we go. And we'll go to gallery mode.
There's everyone.
Mode. There we go, people.
I can see you guys now as well.
Look at all of you beautiful souls. There we go.
Thanks, guys.
Listen, from on behalf of everybody involved, there we go. On behalf of everybody involved, thank you, Ken, so much for being so generous with your time, your knowledge, and I guess your wine as well. Really appreciate it.
I guess so.
Ken, have a lovely evening from all of us here at Grape. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Peace
Ken.
and love. Jabras, Haile Selassie. Ken, have a lovely evening, everybody.